The swamp was alive, but it felt dead at the same time. The United States Marines waded forward, boots sinking into mud that clutched at their ankles like hungry hands. Mosquitoes swarmed in thick clouds, biting any exposed skin. The air was wet, heavy, and sour, filled with the smell of rot and stagnant water. Every breath felt like swallowing steam. The Pacific jungle had never been a place of comfort, but today it felt like a trap. The men moved carefully, rifles raised, eyes darting to every shadow. Nobody spoke above a whisper, and when they did, their words were quick, clipped, and sharp. One wrong sound could give them away. They were deep inside hostile territory now, and all of them knew it. But there was something else that made the silence unbearable. Somewhere out there, hidden in the green chaos of vines and reeds, was an unseen enemy. A sniper, one man, but deadly enough to stop an entire platoon in their tracks. The sniper was more than a threat. He was an idea, a nightmare crawling in the back of every Marine's mind. At any moment, a bullet could whistle out of the shadows and take a life without warning. The Marines had been given a simple order: advance and clear the swamp. Yet nothing about it felt simple. The swamp itself was an enemy. Their boots sank with every step. Their gear grew heavier with each drop of sweat. Leeches clung to their skin. Snakes slipped away into the water, and unseen creatures stirred just beneath the surface. But none of that frightened them as much as the thought of crosshairs already fixed on their helmets. A veteran named Corporal Reeves glanced at the younger men around him. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide, their knuckles white on the grips of their rifles. Reeves had seen this look before, the tightness in the jaw, the nervous jerks of the head. It was the look of men who knew death was waiting, but didn't know when it would strike. He whispered, "Stay low. Watch the trees." His voice was calm, steady, the kind of tone that kept fear at bay, if only for a moment. Private Collins, barely 19, swallowed hard and nodded. His helmet looked too big for his head, his uniform hanging loose on his thin frame. It was his first real patrol since landing. He wanted to look brave, but his hands trembled as he shifted his rifle. Reeves caught the movement and placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Breathe. Just breathe. If he shoots, he won't hit all of us. Keep your head clear." But inside, Reeves knew the truth. A good sniper didn't need many bullets. Just patience. And this one had plenty. The squad moved forward another 20 yards, water reaching their shins. The reeds swayed gently in the humid breeze, though some swore they saw them twitch against the wind. Every splash sounded like thunder. Every bird that burst from the canopy made rifles snap up instinctively. The jungle was a maze of sound and silence, and the sniper was somewhere inside it. Sergeant Miller, leading the patrol, raised a clenched fist. The men froze instantly. His eyes narrowed, scanning the treetops, then the thick swamp grass. He thought he'd seen a flicker, maybe sunlight reflecting on glass, maybe just his imagination. But in this place, a flicker could mean life or death. The men crouched, the swamp water seeping into their uniforms. Sweat dripped down their faces, stinging their eyes. They waited. Nothing moved. The jungle was mocking them, taunting them with stillness. After a full minute, Miller gave a hand signal to advance again. The tension grew thicker the deeper they went. The swamp swallowed sound, amplifying every heartbeat in their chests. One Marine whispered under his breath, "Where the hell is he?" The answer came not from a man, but from the silence itself. Reeves remembered the stories they'd heard before this patrol, of snipers who painted their faces with mud, who covered themselves in moss, who became part of the swamp itself. They said some of them would sit motionless for days, waiting for the perfect shot. He wasn't sure if those stories were true, but as the minutes dragged on, he began to believe them. The Marines were no longer marching soldiers. They were prey moving through a hunter's cage. And though their rifles were loaded, though they outnumbered the sniper by dozens, it didn't matter. The unseen enemy had the power. He could kill, vanish, and kill again. Every few steps, one Marine muttered the same phrase. It spread through the ranks, whispered from one mouth to another, a reminder and a command. Find the sniper. Private Collins found himself repeating it in his head. Find the sniper. Find the sniper. Find him before he finds me. His nerves were fraying, but he kept moving, trying not to imagine the sudden crack of a rifle, the flash, the pain. Then a branch snapped. All rifles turned instantly. Reeves froze, finger on the trigger, eyes locked on the movement. A monkey darted across the vines, shrieking before vanishing again. The Marines let out a collective breath, but it wasn't relief. It was frustration. Their nerves were already raw, and every false alarm made them worse. Collins whispered too loud, "This is crazy. He's watching us right now. I can feel it." Reeves cut him off with a glare and a sharp finger to his lips. Talking like that only fed the fear, and fear was as deadly as any bullet. But Reeves felt it too. The sniper was watching. He was out there, rifle steady, breathing slow, waiting for one mistake. The swamp was his domain, and the Marines were trespassers. A dragonfly buzzed past Collins's ear, and he flinched. Reeves forced himself to stay focused, scanning every patch of reeds, every shadow in the treetops. He couldn't shake the feeling that the sniper had already picked his target. Then Sergeant Miller gave the order to spread out. It was a gamble. Staying clustered made them an easy mark, but spreading thin could isolate them. Still, the men obeyed, each taking a few cautious steps apart, rifles sweeping the jungle. The swamp swallowed them whole, one by one, until each Marine felt utterly alone. That was when the fear sharpened into something primal. Each man carried the same thought. I could be next. The jungle had become a living thing, full of eyes they could not see. The Marines were no longer moving forward as soldiers. They were creeping, stalking, every step a silent plea to the earth not to betray them. The swamp slurped and gurgled beneath their boots, and every sound echoed like a warning. Corporal Reeves stopped, his eyes narrowing at a patch of reeds 30 yards away. He thought he saw it, the tiniest shimmer, as if glass had caught a fraction of light. His heart thudded. He raised his rifle slowly, finger tightening on the trigger. And then, as if in answer, a distant rifle cracked. One Marine cried out. The hunt had begun. The rifle's crack split the air like lightning, echoing through the swamp before anyone could react. A Marine dropped where he stood, his helmet bouncing into the muddy water with a hollow clunk. For a split second, no one moved. The shot had been too clean, too sudden. Then the silence was broken by the sharp hiss of breath, and the whispered curse of a soldier realizing what just happened. Sniper. Someone muttered, the word crawling up every spine like ice water. The squad crouched low, rifles snapping toward the tree line, toward the reeds, toward the canopy. But the jungle revealed nothing. No flash, no movement. No hint of where death had come from. The swamp had swallowed the sniper whole. Private Collins stared at the fallen Marine, his chest tight. The man's lifeless eyes stared back, glassy and unmoving. 1 second he was alive, breathing, walking. The next, gone, erased by a single bullet. Collins felt the swamp press down on him heavier than ever before. He whispered, almost to himself, "How do we fight what we can't see?" Corporal Reeves heard him, but didn't answer. He knew the truth. They weren't fighting a man. They were fighting patience, skill, and silence. And patience never missed. The squad spread wider, trying to cover angles, rifles scanning every gap in the foliage. The reeds swayed lazily with the wind, mocking them. Somewhere, in that endless green, an enemy rifle lay aimed at their hearts. "Eyes up! Check the trees!" Sergeant Miller barked, his voice sharp but low, commanding without giving away too much. He'd faced snipers before. He knew they liked elevation. But he also knew a clever one could be anywhere. Submerged in water, hidden in mud, or nestled in vines thick enough to swallow a man whole. Then another shot cracked. The sound was distant, muffled by the swamp. Another Marine dropped, blood spraying across the reeds as he fell sideways into the muck. The squad returned fire instantly, spraying bullets into the direction of the shot. The swamp exploded with noise, rifles barking, water splashing, but when the smoke cleared, nothing. Just silence again. The sniper had moved. "Damn it!" Reeves muttered under his breath, his frustration boiling. Whoever the sniper was, he wasn't just skilled. He was patient, disciplined, and clever enough to never fire twice from the same place. Each shot was a message. "I can reach you whenever I want." The Marines crouched low, eyes wild, scanning every shadow. Sweat stung their eyes, but none dared to wipe it away. Even the smallest movement could draw fire. The swamp had become a chessboard, and they were pawns trapped on the wrong side. Private Collins gripped his rifle so hard his knuckles turned white. He wanted to shoot at something, anything. The reeds, the vines, the shadows, all of it looked suspicious. But firing blindly would give the sniper more information than it gave them. The boy swallowed hard, trying to steady his breathing. He thought of home, of the quiet streets of his small town, of his mother's voice. He wondered if he would ever see them again. The Marines huddled closer, whispering hurried strategies. Some wanted to push forward fast, hoping movement would make them harder targets. Others argued for patience, for waiting out the sniper, forcing him to grow impatient first. But patience was the sniper's ally, not theirs. Every minute they stayed in place was another chance for him to pick them apart. "Find the sniper," Reeves whispered. It was more than an order now. It was a mantra, a prayer whispered into the humid air. The words passed through the squad like an electric current, steadying them, sharpening their focus. Sergeant Miller scanned the swamp with cold eyes. He knew the sniper's game. Fire, vanish, wait. Each shot was designed not only to kill, but to terrify. A sniper's bullet did more than wound flesh. It tore at the mind, breaking morale, sowing panic. If the squad lost their discipline, they were already finished. He raised his fist again, signaling silence. The Marines froze, ears straining. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called. Somewhere closer, water rippled faintly. But beyond that, nothing. The jungle was still. Too still. Then Collins saw it. Or thought he did. A flicker, the tiniest shimmer of glass in the reeds. His heart leapt into his throat. He raised his rifle, finger trembling on the trigger. There, that's him. But before he could fire, Reeves grabbed his arm and shook his head. "Not yet," Reeves mouthed. He knew what Collins didn't. The sniper wanted them to fire at ghosts, to waste ammunition, to reveal their positions. Every hesitation, every whisper of doubt, was part of the trap. Another shot cracked. This time, the bullet missed, barely. It smacked into the tree just inches from Collins's head, showering him with bark. He dropped into the mud, gasping, eyes wide with terror. The sniper was playing with them now, testing them, choosing who to kill and who to scare. Collins pressed his face into the muck, trying to disappear into the swamp. His body shook, but deep down he felt something shift. Fear was still there, but now anger burned hotter. He wanted to fight back. He wanted to find this ghost and end it. "Stay down," Reeves hissed, pulling him back into cover. He's toying with us. Don't give him what he wants. The squad crawled low, moving inch by inch. Every leaf, every ripple, every patch of reeds became an enemy. The swamp was alive with illusions, and the sniper was hidden inside them. The men's nerves frayed with each passing second, but discipline kept them moving. One Marine, Private Harker, whispered too loudly, "This is suicide. We're just targets out here." A bullet snapped his words in half. Harker collapsed instantly, the sound of the shot blending into the splash of his fall. The men froze again, horror in their eyes. The sniper hadn't just killed another man. He had silenced doubt. His bullet had spoken louder than any sergeant could. Reeves clenched his jaw. The enemy wasn't just killing their bodies. He was dismantling their spirit, one man at a time. Sergeant Miller's eyes hardened. He made a silent vow. They would find this ghost, no matter how long it took. But inside, he felt the truth pressing down like the swamp water around his boots. A sniper wasn't just a soldier. He was something else. Something patient, merciless, and almost inhuman. The Marines pressed forward, the words echoing again and again. "Find the sniper. Find the sniper." But the swamp only answered with silence. And from somewhere unseen, a steady pair of eyes looked back through the crosshairs. Calm, unblinking, waiting for the next perfect shot. Fear spread through the platoon like smoke, curling into every breath and tightening every chest. They had already lost too many men to the unseen sniper, and every step forward felt like walking into the crosshairs of death itself. Yet, in the thickest fog of fear, something else began to take hold, a brotherhood forged in fire, a bond that only war could create. Corporal Reeves wiped the sweat from his brow with a muddy sleeve and glanced at the Marines crouched in the muck around him. Their eyes were wide, their faces pale beneath their helmets, but they were still here, still holding their rifles, still fighting the urge to bolt. He felt a surge of pride. Fear hadn't broken them yet. "Listen to me," Reeves whispered harshly, his voice carrying just enough for the squad to hear. "You stay alive by trusting the man next to you. You watch his back, and he'll watch yours. That's how we beat him." Private Collins, still trembling from the bullet that had nearly taken his head, nodded quickly. His hands shook as he adjusted his rifle, but he kept his eyes on Reeves like a student watching his teacher. Reeves had become more than a corporal. He was the anchor holding Collins together. Sergeant Miller crouched nearby, eyes scanning the swamp like a hawk. He was the oldest man in the squad, battle-tested, scars hidden under the grime of his uniform. He knew what fear could do to men. He'd seen it break units before. But he also knew something else. When men fought for each other, they could endure anything. He leaned toward the group and spoke low, steady, controlled. "The swamp belongs to him, but we belong to each other. Don't think about the bullet you can't see. Think about the brother next to you. You protect him. He protects you. That's how we make it out." The words sank deep. They weren't just instructions. They were a lifeline. The Marines looked at one another, eyes meeting in silent agreements. Fear was still there, but now it was shared, and shared fear became courage. Private Harker's death still hung heavy over them. His body floated in the swamp, just a few yards away, helmet tilted, eyes staring blankly at the canopy above. They couldn't recover him yet. Moving out into the open would only feed the sniper another victim. But his loss wasn't meaningless. It hardened them, made them cling tighter to one another. Collins shifted closer to Reeves, their shoulders brushing as they crouched. "You ever been hunted like this before?" he whispered. Reeves didn't look at him. His eyes stayed on the swamp. "Not like this. But I've seen worse than bullets, kid. Fear's the real killer. Don't let it win." Collins swallowed, nodding. He wanted to believe it, but his heart pounded so hard, It felt like the sniper could hear it from across the swamp. Another Marine, Private Sanchez, muttered a prayer under his breath. His lips moved fast, words spilling in Spanish, crossing himself quickly before gripping his rifle tighter. Reeves caught the look in his eye. It wasn't just fear. It was determination, a desperate faith that if God didn't protect him, maybe his brothers would. The squad moved again, slower now, crawling in pairs, leapfrogging their positions so no one was left uncovered. Each man became the other's shield. When one scanned the trees, the other scanned the reeds. When one waded forward, the other crouched and waited, ready to fire. It wasn't a strategy born from manuals or orders. It was instinct, trust, brotherhood in its purest form. The sniper fired again. The shot rang out, and a bullet whizzed past Sanchez, close enough to tear a hole in his sleeve. He dropped into the muck, heart hammering. Reeves and Collins instantly returned fire in the direction of the sound, their bullets tearing into reeds and splashing water. They didn't know if they hit him. Probably not. But it wasn't about hitting. It was about telling the sniper, "We're not just prey." Sanchez gasped, staring at the hole in his sleeve. Reeves reached over, grabbed his shoulder, and shook him hard. "You're alive. That's all that matters. Don't freeze up now." Sanchez nodded, teeth gritted, breath sharp. He forced himself back up, rifle steady again. The swamp grew quieter as the men adjusted to their new rhythm. For every step forward, they reminded each other of their training. They tapped shoulders, exchanged signals, whispered encouragements. These weren't just soldiers anymore. They were lifelines keeping one another tethered to sanity in the face of an invisible ghost. Sergeant Miller crawled through the reeds, his voice low but firm. "He can kill one man, maybe two. But he can't kill all of us if we stay together. That's our strength. Don't give him the cracks he's looking for." Collins clung to those words. Every time he wanted to curl up in the mud and disappear, he forced himself to glance at Reeves or Sanchez or Miller. He wasn't alone. None of them were. That thought steadied him, just enough to keep moving forward. They began to talk less of finding the sniper and more of protecting each other. The mantra shifted. Fear still stalked them, but now, when it pressed too close, they leaned into each other. A hand on a shoulder, a nod, a whispered curse or joke in the dark. Small things, but they kept the fire burning inside them. Night crept closer, and with it came a strange comfort. The darkness would help the sniper too, but it also gave the Marines something. A chance to move unseen, a chance to rest, a chance to feel like the swamp itself might cover them instead of exposing them. As they huddled in a shallow patch of mud, waiting for orders, Reeves glanced at the men beside him. He saw fear, exhaustion, and mud caked into every line of their faces. But he also saw something else. A fire in their eyes, a refusal to give up. "Remember this," he whispered, his voice carrying across the group. "He's one man. We're many. He's got patience, sure. But we've got each other. That's our edge." Collins felt the words sink into his bones. For the first time since stepping into the swamp, he believed they might actually survive this. Not because they were stronger than the sniper, not because they were smarter, but because they weren't alone. The sniper would kill again. Of that, there was no doubt. But every bullet he fired would only strengthen the bond between the Marines, drawing them tighter, turning fear into resolve. In the jungle of death, brotherhood was the only shield. And as the night closed in around them, the Marines clung to that shield with everything they had. The swamp no longer felt endless. It felt like a cage. Every direction looked the same. Walls of green, curtains of vines, reeds thick enough to hide an army. The sniper could be anywhere. But the Marines had reached a breaking point. Fear was no longer enough to freeze them. It sharpened into anger, into resolve. If the sniper wanted to hunt them, they would hunt him back. Sergeant Miller crouched in the mud, his hand signaling for silence. His face was hard, his eyes cold. He'd made his decision. Waiting only fed the sniper. Moving carelessly gave him targets. The only choice left was to hunt, to crawl into the swamp like predators and drag the ghost out of his hole. "We don't let him own this swamp," Miller whispered. "We own it. We move slow. We move smart. Eyes everywhere. He's good, but he's only one man." The Marines nodded. Their eyes met in grim understanding. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They were hunters stalking a phantom. Corporal Reeves led a pair of scouts forward, crawling belly down through the reeds. The muck sucked at their uniforms, and mosquitoes swarmed their faces, but they pressed on. Reeves held a shard of broken mirror in one hand, angling it carefully above the reeds to catch glimpses without exposing his head. The sunlight caught on water, leaves, and branches, but no rifle scope, no glint of glass. Behind him, Private Collins mirrored the move, his breath shaky but steady. Every sound, the splash of his elbow, the crunch of a twig, made his heart stop. He imagined the sniper's scope zeroing in on the noise. He imagined the crack, the flash, the instant darkness. But Reeves kept him moving, crawling inch by inch, patient, deliberate. Elsewhere, Sanchez and two others crept toward higher ground, a slight ridge that overlooked part of the swamp. They moved slow, rifles scanning, covering each other with every step. Their goal wasn't to kill yet. It was to see, to read the swamp like the sniper did. The hunt was cautious, methodical. Every man knew the sniper's greatest weapon wasn't his rifle. It was the fear he created. And so they fought back not with speed, but with discipline. Hours passed. Sweat drenched their uniforms. Mud clung to their skin. Their stomachs growled with hunger, but they ignored it. Their world had shrunk to the space in front of their rifles, the rustle of leaves, the faint ripple of water. Collins froze suddenly. He thought he saw something, a shape in the reeds, too still, too perfect. His finger tightened on the trigger. But Reeves grabbed his wrist and shook his head. "Not yet," Reeves whispered. "Don't give him the shot." Collins swallowed, lowering his rifle slightly. He realized the shape was nothing more than a stump. But it could have been him, baiting the sniper with his nervousness, offering him an opening. Reeves's words echoed in his mind. Patience wins. Far off, a gunshot cracked. Not at them, but into the swamp itself. A feint, a taunt. The Marines froze, waiting for the bullet that never came. Miller clenched his jaw. The sniper was playing games, trying to remind them he was always there, always watching. "Keep moving," Miller ordered, voice low. "He wants us scared. Don't give it to him." As dusk approached, the swamp transformed again. Mist rolled in low, curling around the reeds like ghostly fingers. The air grew cooler, but the silence grew heavier. The Marines knew the sniper would use the fog. It would make him invisible, but it would also make them invisible. The hunters crept closer, splitting into pairs and spreading wide. Each team had a sector to cover, overlapping fields of vision. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was in the jungle, but it gave them the sense of control they desperately needed. Sanchez, perched on the ridge, whispered into the radio, "Movement." "Can't confirm." "North quadrant." Miller raised a hand. "Hold fire." They waited. The swamp gave nothing back. Just the hiss of insects, the croak of distant frogs. Then Reeves saw it. Barely a ripple, the water shifting unnaturally against the current. He stiffened. Someone was moving in the swamp, submerged, slow, deliberate. He signaled silently. Collins followed his eyes, straining. At first he saw nothing, and the faintest outline beneath the reeds. Reeves raised his rifle, but Miller's hand stopped him. "Wait," the sergeant whispered. The shape vanished. The water stilled. The swamp swallowed its secret again. Collins felt his heart hammer in frustration. "We had him?" he whispered hoarsely. "No," Reeves corrected. "He had us." He wanted that shot. That was the lesson the swamp was teaching them. The sniper was more than a man. He was patience personified, a ghost who thrived on their desperation. But the Marines weren't giving up. They adjusted their tactics. They left traps of their own, helmets on sticks poking out of the reeds, shapes made to look like crouching men. Hours later, a shot cracked, hitting one of the decoys. The Marines smiled grimly. The ghost wasn't flawless. He could be fooled. "Now we know," Miller murmured. "He's not untouchable." The hunt pressed deeper into the swamp. Each step felt heavier, each shadow longer. The day bled into night, and the Marines kept crawling, waiting, listening. They weren't prey anymore, not entirely. They were something else now. Something hungrier. The sniper was still out there, unseen, unheard, watching. But for the first time, the Marines felt like they were watching back. And the swamp, which once belonged only to him, now belonged to both hunter and hunted. The real game had begun. Dusk descended like a curtain, and with it came the fog. It rose from the swamp in thick waves, curling low across the water, creeping between reeds and trees until the jungle seemed half hidden, half swallowed. The Marines had long feared the daylight because of how clearly it revealed them to the sniper. But nightfall was worse. The fog didn't just conceal their movements, it concealed his too. And everyone knew the ghost they hunted would use it to his advantage. The platoon moved carefully, slower now, their silhouettes blending into the gray haze. Every breath misted faintly in the cooling air. Water lapped softly at their boots. Somewhere, something splashed, and every rifle snapped toward the sound. Nothing. Only silence again, as if the swamp itself had decided to play tricks. "Corporal." Reeves pressed his belly into the muck, peering through the haze with sharp eyes. He had been waiting all day for this moment. Dusk was when men slipped, when nerves unraveled, when hunters revealed themselves. But even Reeves, hardened by war, felt the weight of the silence pressing harder against his chest. It was too quiet, too staged. Private Collins crept alongside him, his young face smeared with mud, his eyes red with exhaustion. His breath shook, but his grip on his rifle had grown steadier since morning. He whispered, barely audible, "He's out here." Watching. Reeves didn't reply. He knew. He could feel it too, that crawling sensation between the shoulder blades, the unshakable sense that crosshairs were painted on their backs. Then came the moment. It began as nothing more than a shadow, half seen through the fog. A shape, tall, still, rising slowly from the swamp. For a heartbeat, the Marines thought it was a trick of the mist, a tree root, or fallen log. But then it moved. The figure emerged, dripping water and moss, ghillie suit soaked and heavy, strands of swamp grass clinging to the fabric as if the earth itself had grown it onto his body. His face was streaked with mud so thick it erased human features, leaving behind only the hollow outlines of eyes. He rose with a deliberate calm, as though the swamp had decided to give him form. To the Marines, it was less like a man appearing, and more like a ghost pulled from the mire. Private Sanchez saw him first. His breath caught, eyes wide, whispering in Spanish under his breath, as though a prayer could hold back the figure. Reeves followed Sanchez's gaze and felt his stomach twist. He had seen enemies before, but this was something different. The sniper lifted his rifle with the same calm, unhurried grace with which he had risen. The barrel gleamed faintly in the dying light, slick with swamp water. Every move was precise, rehearsed, as though he wasn't reacting to them but acting out a plan written long before they arrived. "Contact," Miller hissed, his voice sharp but restrained, refusing to let panic crack through. The Marines froze. Every man had the same thought. Is he real? In the fog, in the silence, with the swamp clinging to him like armor, the sniper looked less like flesh and blood and more like a phantom conjured by war. For a split second, time seemed to stop. Even the swamp went still, as if holding its breath for the inevitable. Then the sniper fired. The shot thundered across the fog, echoing like a cannon blast in the suffocating quiet. A Marine to Collins's left dropped instantly, blood spraying into the mist. Chaos erupted. "Fire! Fire!" Miller roared. The swamp lit up with muzzle flashes. Bullets ripped into reeds, shredded vines, and tore through fog. The Marines unleashed everything they had, the quiet jungle exploding into sound and fury. But the ghost moved. He slipped sideways into the mist, vanishing even as bullets cut through where he'd stood. His shape reappeared, blurred and shifting, then disappeared again, using the fog as his cloak. Collins fired wildly, adrenaline surging. Every glimpse of shadow became a target. He screamed as he shot, rage drowning out fear. But Reeves grabbed his shoulder and shoved him down into the muck. "Don't waste it," Reeves barked. "Watch, look for him." The sniper fired again. Another Marine fell, choking on his last breath before sinking into the swamp. The ghost never rushed, never panicked. He fired, moved, vanished, and appeared elsewhere, like the swamp itself was carrying him. To the Marines, it felt like fighting something inhuman. He didn't stumble. He didn't make mistakes. He was always just far enough away, just hidden enough that their bullets cut only fog and reeds. "Circle him," Miller commanded, hand signals flying. The squad split, moving wide, trying to box the phantom in. The hunters were becoming desperate, their patience thinning. This wasn't the sniper they had stalked all day. This was something worse, something they couldn't quite name. Collins's breathing came in ragged bursts. His helmet dripped fog and sweat into his eyes, blurring his vision. He wiped it away furiously, scanning, searching. Then he saw it again, the ghostly figure rising briefly from the reeds, rifle steady, face still obscured by mud and shadow. "There!" Collins shouted, raising his rifle. But before he could fire, Reeves shoved him down. The sniper's bullet cracked overhead, shattering the tree behind them. Collins gasped, realizing Reeves had just saved his life. "You don't yell his name," Reeves growled. "You don't call him out. You kill him quietly, or he kills you." Collins nodded, swallowing hard, his hands steadied. His fear turned sharper, leaner. The sniper kept moving, each shot a message, each movement a taunt. The Marines poured fire into the swamp, but the fog always took him back, hiding him like a loyal ally. He was a ghost, a phantom, a nightmare with a rifle. And yet, for the first time, they had seen him. For the first time, the legend had taken form. When the gunfire paused, the swamp fell silent again. Bodies floated half-submerged. The fog hung thicker, heavy with smoke and death. The Marines crouched low, gasping, rifles trembling in their hands. Reeves wiped mud from his face, his jaw clenched tight. He leaned toward Collins and whispered, "He's no ghost. He bleeds, and if he bleeds, we can kill him." Collins nodded, gripping his rifle like it was the only thing keeping him alive. But deep down, he couldn't shake the image burned into his mind. A figure rising from the swamp, calm, patient, untouchable. To the Marines, he would always be remembered as more than a man. The swamp had given him form, and in the fog, the ghost had finally appeared. The fog had turned red, not from light, but from memory, the memory of blood already spilled, men already fallen. Every Marine who still breathed knew the sniper wasn't just a phantom anymore. He was real flesh and bone. They had seen him rise, seen his rifle flash, seen their brothers collapse into the swamp with a last look of disbelief frozen in their eyes. Now came the reckoning. Sergeant Miller crouched low in the reeds, jaw locked tight, eyes hard. His platoon was bleeding, morale hanging by a thread, but the man refused to surrender an inch to fear. His voice was cold steel. "He's one man," Miller growled. "One man. He bleeds like us. Tonight, he dies in this swamp." The Marines clung to those words as if they were a lifeline. Rage simmered beneath their exhaustion, their fear boiling over into determination. No one wanted to die here, nameless in a pool of muck. If they were going to leave this swamp alive, it would be over the sniper's body. The clash began with a whisper. A splash, faint and deliberate, to the left. Private Collins jerked his rifle toward the sound, eyes wide. Reeves grabbed his arm again. Wait, the sniper's bullet cracked from the right. A Marine's helmet spun into the water. Screams ripped through the fog as the man slumped, lifeless. "He's moving the sound," Reeves snarled. "He's playing us." But this time, Miller was ready. His fist shot into the air, signaling. The squad split fast, some charging left, others right, trying to close the circle before the sniper could vanish again. The swamp erupted. Gunfire roared through the fog, lighting up the mist in flashing bursts. Bullets hissed into trees, chewed up vines, tore through reeds. The Marines fired in arcs, their muzzles covering every possible angle. And then he was there. The sniper burst from the fog like a demon, ghillie suit soaked and clinging, rifle snapping up with terrifying precision. His shot rang out. Another Marine collapsed, chest punched open. But before the ghost could fade again, Sanchez returned fire, rounds shredding the reeds around him. "Pin him," Miller bellowed. The swamp howled with bullets. The sniper ducked, weaving between cover with unnatural fluidity. He dropped low, returning fire in bursts so precise they seemed guided by fate itself. Every pull of his trigger took its toll. A scream, a body, another hole ripped through the Marine's resolve. But for the first time, he wasn't touchable. Bullets grazed past him, shredding strands of his ghillie suit, ripping moss and mud from his back. The ghost could bleed, and the Marines were closing in. Collins and Reeves crawled through the muck, flanking hard. Collins's heart hammered in his chest, each beat a drum of fear and fury. His eyes locked on the moving shadow ahead, the phantom slipping through fog. This was no longer a story told in whispers. This was life and death in front of him. "Now," Reeves hissed. Both men opened fire. Their rounds slammed into the reeds, pinning the sniper down. He dove sideways, splashing into chest-deep water, firing even as he fell. The shot ripped Collins's pack apart, jerking him sideways. Collins coughed mud and water, teeth clenched, and screamed as he returned fire. "Die, damn you!" The sniper vanished again. Silence for one breath, two, then he rose behind him. Reeves spun, firing. The sniper's bullet ripped through Reeves's shoulder, spinning him into the muck. Collins roared, unloading every round left in his rifle. The sniper dropped low, the rounds barely missing, the fog hiding his retreat once more. "Reeves!" Collins grabbed him, dragging him into cover. Blood poured through the corporal's sleeve, soaking the mud. "Keep going," Reeves gasped, teeth gritted. "Don't stop. Don't stop." Elsewhere, Sanchez and Miller advanced through the fog, firing in tight bursts. They were closing the circle tighter, pressing the ghost into a shrinking corner of swamp. For every Marine that fell, the survivors pushed harder. The sniper fought like a cornered animal. His shots came faster now, less patient, more furious. He snapped targets down with brutal accuracy, but the Marines didn't falter. They pressed forward, their fire overlapping, their bodies crawling through muck and blood to cut him off. And the swamp exploded. Grenades arced through the fog, landing in pools and reeds. The blasts thundered, water and mud erupting into the air. The sniper vanished in the chaos, flung somewhere into the mist. "Advance!" Miller shouted, voice shaking the fog. The Marines surged forward, rifles blazing. They weren't hunting anymore. They were charging, reckless with desperation, hungry for vengeance. Collins, dragging Reeves behind cover, raised his rifle again. He saw movement ahead, the ghillie suit, shredded, half-burned from the grenades, the Phantom staggering now. He wasn't untouchable anymore. He was wounded human. "Sergeant!" Collins screamed. There. Every rifle turned. The swamp roared with fire. Bullets ripped into the reeds, tearing chunks of fabric and flesh from the ghost's body. He stumbled, reeled, dropped to one knee. His rifle swung up one last time, firing blindly. A Marine cried out and fell. The sniper tried to rise, mud sucking at his legs, blood streaking his suit. His body shook, but his face never faltered. The same hollow, mud-streaked mask, eyes cold, unblinking. And Sanchez's shot hit. The round punched through the sniper's chest, knocking him back into the swamp. Silence followed. The fog curled around his body, ripples spreading out where he fell. The rifle slipped from his hands, sinking slowly into the mire. The Marines froze, rifles still raised, waiting, listening. Every nerve screamed that he would rise again, that the ghost couldn't die like any man. But the swamp stayed quiet. The ripples smoothed. The body lay still. Collins felt his knees buckle. His rifle slipped from his hands. He didn't cheer. None of them did. There was no victory here, only survival. Miller stepped forward, eyes fixed on the fallen sniper. His voice was low, steady. "He's done. It's over." The swamp disagreed. It felt alive still, watching, listening. But the Marines had faced the ghost and lived. And for the first time, the Phantom had bled, had fallen, had been dragged from legend into death. The deadly clash had ended, but none of them would forget the price. The gunfire died slowly, like thunder retreating across a storm-ravaged sky. One by one, the rifles fell quiet, their muzzles smoking, their barrels still hot to the touch. The echoes faded into the swamp until only the natural sounds crept back, frogs croaking, insects buzzing, water lapping gently at the reeds. For a long moment, the Marines did not move. They crouched in the mud, rifles raised, hearts pounding. Every man stared into the fog, half expecting the sniper to rise again. But he did not. The ghost lay motionless where he had fallen, the swamp cradling his body as though it had reclaimed one of its own. His ghillie suit blended with the reeds, his mud-painted face already looking like part of the earth. If not for the faint ripples spreading around him, one could almost believe he had dissolved back into the swamp entirely. Sergeant Miller finally broke the stillness. He lowered his rifle, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked painful. His voice was flat, carrying the weariness of a man who had lost too much already. "Cease fire," he said. The words traveled through the mist like an order from another world. Slowly, hesitantly, the Marines lowered their weapons. Fingers loosened on triggers. The tension in their shoulders slackened, but not by much. The swamp was quiet, but quiet didn't mean safe. Collins sank onto his knees, chest heaving, sweat mixing with mud across his face. His hands trembled as he tried to steady his rifle on the ground. For hours he had been wound tighter than a spring, convinced that death waited with every step, every breath. Now, as the silence pressed in, he felt his body trying to unravel all at once. Reeves groaned beside him, clutching his wounded shoulder. Blood had soaked his uniform, sticky and dark, but his eyes were still sharp. "We got him," Reeves muttered, almost in disbelief. "We finally got the bastard." Collins looked toward the sniper's body, barely visible through the fog. He nodded, but the gesture was hollow. "Yeah," he whispered. "We did." But even as he said the words, he couldn't shake the image of the man rising from the swamp, rifle steady, eyes dead and unblinking. It hadn't felt like killing a man. It had felt like fighting the swamp itself. And Collins wondered, had they killed him, or had they simply survived his haunting? Around them, the cost of the clash became clear. Bodies floated half-submerged in the water, uniforms soaked, faces pale. The swamp that had been their battlefield was now their grave. Some Marines slumped against trees, their breath shallow, their wounds raw. Others moved numbly from body to body, checking pulses, closing eyes, retrieving dog tags. Sanchez knelt by one of the fallen, his hands trembling as he closed the eyes of a Marine he had laughed with that morning. He whispered a prayer in Spanish, his voice breaking halfway through. His tears cut streaks down mud-caked cheeks, but he didn't wipe them away. Sergeant Miller walked among the dead, silent. He stopped at each man, bowing his head for a brief second before moving on. His face betrayed nothing, but inside, each loss carved another mark into his soul. He had led them here. He had ordered the hunt. And though they had survived, too many had not. The fog thickened as the night deepened, cloaking the swamp in a gray shroud. Lanterns flickered faintly, casting soft halos of light that barely pierced the mist. The swamp seemed endless again, and in that endlessness, the Marines felt their isolation more than ever. Collins sat back, his rifle resting across his lap. His body ached, every muscle screaming from exhaustion, but his mind would not quiet. He thought of home, of his mother's kitchen, of laughter he hadn't heard in months. He thought of the sniper, lying dead not far away. Somewhere, that man had a home too. Somewhere, someone might be waiting for him, never knowing he had become the ghost of this swamp. The thought unsettled him. Reeves noticed his silence. "Don't waste your pity on him," Reeves said through gritted teeth. He wasn't a ghost. He was a killer. And killers don't get sympathy. Collins didn't answer. Maybe Reeves was right. But in the fog, the sniper's image lingered too vividly. He had been more than just a killer. He had been an idea, patience, precision, terror made flesh. And ideas didn't die the way men did. Nearby, Sanchez and two others began digging shallow graves. The ground was wet, sucking at their shovels, refusing to give easily. The swamp wasn't made for burying men, but they couldn't leave their brothers exposed. The work was slow, miserable, and heavy with grief. Miller finally crouched near Collins, his voice low but firm. "We'll move at first light. Until then, we hold position. Stay sharp. Ghost or no ghost, this swamp still wants us dead." Collins nodded weakly. His eyelids burned with fatigue, but he knew sleep would not come. Not tonight. Not with the phantom's image burned into his mind. As the night dragged on, the silence became heavier than the gunfire had been. Every man sat alone with his thoughts, haunted by the clash they had survived. For some, it was the memory of the sniper's unshakable calm. For others, it was the faces of their fallen brothers, faces they would never see laugh again. Reeves leaned back against a tree, wincing as pain throbbed through his wounded shoulder. "Funny thing," he muttered, half to himself, half to Collins. "We came in here to find him. And we did. But I don't feel like we won." Collins stared into the fog. Because we didn't, he said softly. The swamp croaked and hissed, alive again now that the guns had quieted. It seemed to mock them, to whisper that they had killed one ghost only to awaken others. When dawn finally began to break, it came slowly, almost reluctantly. The fog thinned just enough for the first pale light to filter through the trees. The swamp looked the same as it had before, but the men who sat in it were not the same. They rose stiffly, gathering their gear, their rifles, their wounded. They prepared to leave behind the graves they had dug, the bodies they couldn't carry, the memories they couldn't escape. As they moved, Collins glanced back one last time. Through the thinning mist, he saw the sniper's body, still half submerged, staring blankly at the sky. The swamp lapped gently at him, already beginning to pull him under. Collins shivered. He didn't know if the ghost had truly died, or if some part of him still lingered, waiting for the next platoon, the next group of men to stumble into this place. The silence after the storm had ended. But for Collins and the others, the echoes of that ghost would never fade. Weeks had passed since the swamp swallowed the lives of half the platoon. The surviving Marines were back on base, their uniforms still caked in mud, their boots stained with swamp water. But the swamp hadn't left them. Its fog, its silence, and the ghost they had hunted clung to their minds like an unshakable shadow. Corporal Reeves sat on a bunk, cleaning his rifle with mechanical precision. Each click of the bolt echoed in the small room, a sound far removed from the chaos of the swamp, yet somehow just as sharp. His shoulder throbbed constantly, a reminder that survival had a price. The nightmares were worse. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the sniper rising from the mist, calm, precise, unyielding. The image was burned into his skull, a phantom more real than the walls around him. Private Collins paced the barracks floor, hands shoved deep into his pockets. He felt restless, uneasy, unable to stay still. The memory of the sniper's hollow eyes haunted him, a stare that seemed to pierce through both fog and flesh, through fear and determination alike. It wasn't just what the sniper did to them in the swamp. It was what he represented. Patience, precision, death that could strike silently, without warning. Sergeant Miller entered the room, his face unreadable, yet lined with fatigue that spoke louder than any words. He had seen men break under less. He had seen fear erode discipline. But these Marines, his Marines, had survived something almost impossible. And yet, as he looked at them, he knew survival did not equal peace. "You all look like hell," Miller said bluntly. He placed a hand on Collins's shoulder. "I know what's running through your heads. That ghost, that sniper, he's not just gone. He's here." He tapped his chest, over his heart, and here, he pointed to his temple. "And until you let it go, he'll be with you every time you close your eyes." Collins nodded, swallowing hard. He wanted to believe that returning to base meant safety, that the swamp's terror had stayed behind in mud and reeds. But deep down, he knew the ghost traveled with him. Reeves finally spoke, voice low. "Do you think he really died?" Miller shook his head slowly. "I don't know. But it doesn't matter. Whether he's alive or not, the swamp made him more than a man. He's a lesson now. He's what happens when patience, skill, and death meet in the same place. And it's our job to carry that lesson forward." Outside the barracks, sunlight filtered weakly through the morning haze, yet inside, the room felt heavy. The survivors carried more than wounds. They carried guilt, memory, and the silent acknowledgement of those who had not made it back. Harker, Jenkins, and the others, gone, swallowed by water, fog, and bullets. Their faces haunted the remaining Marines in every quiet moment. Collins sank onto the edge of a bunk, burying his face in his hands. "I keep seeing him," he whispered. "I hear the shots. I see the fog. I see the swamp. I see them. Miller crouched beside him. I know, kid. Me too. But listen carefully. Surviving isn't about forgetting. Surviving is about carrying it without letting it destroy you. That ghost will always be there, but you decide how much of your life he gets. The Marines spent the rest of the day in quiet reflection. Some cleaned their weapons. Some wrote letters home they would never send. Some simply stared out the windows at the base's orderly grounds, wishing they were still lost in the swamp, where life and death had been so raw, so simple, so immediate. That night, Collins couldn't sleep. He lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the air conditioning, the distant clatter of boots on the floor. Every creak sounded like a rifle bolt. Every shadow seemed to flicker with the ghillie suit's outline. He closed his eyes and immediately saw the sniper rise from the reeds, rifle steady, eyes hollow. His body jerked awake, gasping. Reeves shared the same torment, pacing the room silently, flinching at every unexpected sound. Even Miller found no solace. The ghost had followed them beyond the swamp, and though his body had been struck down, its presence lingered. Yet over time, the Marines began to understand something crucial. The ghost wasn't just a killer. He was a symbol. The embodiment of fear that comes from knowing death can strike silently, with precision, anywhere. They had faced him. They had survived. And that survival became more than a memory. It became a standard, a measure of their own courage, discipline, and resilience. The story of the ghost sniper spread quietly among the ranks. New recruits whispered about him in hushed tones, sharing tales of the phantom who moved through swamps like water, who fired like lightning, who vanished into mist. He became legend, a cautionary tale, and a reminder of the cost of underestimating the enemy, whether human, natural, or something that straddled the line between both. For the survivors, the ghost was also a teacher. Collins found himself returning to training with renewed intensity, determined to ensure he would never again feel powerless against someone like that. Reeves rebuilt his confidence, learning to harness fear as a weapon, rather than letting it dominate him. Miller carried the burden quietly, guiding the next generation of Marines with the lessons of patience, vigilance, and the haunting knowledge that not all enemies are visible. Years later, Collins would tell the story in interviews, careful not to glorify the violence, but to preserve the lesson. He described the swamp, the fog, the patience of the sniper, and the brotherhood that had kept them alive. Every listener shivered at the idea of a single man who could control fear so completely. Every listener marveled at how survival depended not on skill alone, but on trust, courage, and the unbreakable bond between soldiers. Yet even as the story spread, Collins never forgot the sight of the sniper rising from the mist, the hollow eyes, the ghillie suit soaked with swamp water. He could close his eyes anywhere, base, street, bedroom, and see him standing silently in fog, waiting, watching. That was the ghost. That was what made him unforgettable. And in a strange, unsettling way, the Marines learned to live with it. They learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite it. That the dead and the haunted could teach the living. That even ghosts in death could shape life. The swamp remained far away, yet it had followed them home, in memories, in nightmares, in whispers between soldiers. The ghost sniper had become legend. A man who was more than a man, yet real enough to leave scars that no medical kit could heal. Collins often thought of the words Sergeant Miller had said, "He's here and here." He understood now. The ghost would always be in their hearts, in their minds, in the bond forged by fire and blood. They had survived him, but he had survived them in memory, a phantom teacher, a silent witness to their courage. In the end, they did not speak of victory. There was no celebration, no cheers. only respect. For the men lost, for the swamp, for the phantom who had made them who they were. And in that respect, in that memory, the ghost lived forever. The Marines would tell the story, passing it down quietly, carefully, always remembering the patience, the terror, the brotherhood, and the silent figure that emerged from the swamp to teach them the ultimate lesson about fear, survival, and the human spirit. And somewhere, in the fog, the ghost waited. Always patient, always precise, always remembered.